Welcome back to the Happy Saver podcast. I'm Ruth, a personal finance blogger here in Aotearoa. Now, have you ever wondered about other people and their money? Well, I sure do. So in this podcast, I chat with a diverse bunch of just regular people, the majority of whom are Kiwis, but the odd Australian does sneak in. I learn their stories about their financial experiences, and then I share helpful, relatable information from Kiwis who generously explain how they handle their pūtea or money in New Zealand. Now, I hope you enjoyed today's episode as much as I enjoyed creating it. Here goes. After my long kōrero with Sammy to prepare for this episode, I ended the call feeling like I'd just done a few rounds with New Zealand boxer Daniela Smith. My head was spinning from all the twists and turns of Sammy's story, and it's taken quite the effort in editing to detail it for you today. If you wonder why I create these episodes the way I do, it's because people share a lot of detail, but it's rarely in a coherent order, which is no fault of theirs because life is complicated. Now, after 57 years of personal and financial trauma, last year, in 2024, Sammy, which is not her real name, had her aha moment when she said, "Screw it, I'm sick of this," and she started to let a little light shine on her money. Once she had opened the door a crack, she basically just ripped the whole roof off her financial life and has had a complete and hopefully permanent financial transformation. She's not done yet. She has some mahi in front of her, but as I'll explain, she is well on her way. I'll often meet people who blow up their financial lives for the better, and the progress they make is astounding, and Sammy is one of these people. Twice divorced and with 3 children, one of whom has special needs, she has spent many years often living below the poverty line and buying bread and milk on a credit card that she could not pay off, and sometimes she has made decisions that kept her on the poverty line. Over the decades, she trained as a teacher and stabilised her situation, but still made questionable financial choices until finally, aged 58 today, she is charging ahead. Now, this is going to be a good episode, and it felt timely to speak with Sammy just a few days before International Women's Day because this wahine is doing really well for herself now. Now, before I get started, you know the drill. Please take a listen to today's sponsor. Now, here at the Happy Saver, I do a ton of voluntary mahi, but sometimes I've just got to have some support to keep doing what I love to do. And without an episode sponsor, I wouldn't be able to bring you this podcast. Okay, you've got me. I'll admit it. I'm the money nerd in our household. I genuinely enjoy keeping a very close eye on Pocketsmith as it tracks our retirement funds, our investments, the value of our home, and of course, the daily flow of money into our mini bank accounts. The details fascinate me, numbers fascinate me. But my husband Johnny, not so much. He just wants to know we're doing okay, but he is just not interested in all those details. We both think of money differently. Pocketsmith is aware of this as it lets me create a custom dashboard that shows Johnny the same information I see, but differently, in far less detail, meaning he still gets to play an active role in our joint financial planning using information that makes sense to him. If you have a spouse trying to opt out of talking about your money, I think Pocketsmith might be the secret weapon to bring you together and foster healthy conversations around money in your home. If you want to supercharge your finances with Pocketsmith, have we got a deal for you. Happy Saver listeners get a whopping 50% off your first 2 months of Pocketsmith's foundation plan. To get your deal, go to pocketsmith.com/the Happy Saver. That's pocketsmith.com/the Happy Saver. There are many reasons why Sammy wanted to remain anonymous, and I fully respect that, so you are not even going to learn where in Aotearoa she resides. But I'd far rather be vague on those details than never get to share a story that I think many will benefit from hearing. Sammy herself has learned a lot from this podcast, and her hope is that she, in turn, can help someone else today. When I asked her for a bit of a background about her upbringing, it quickly became apparent that the challenges that have plagued her throughout her life began early in her life, when she lost her mother to suicide while in her early teens. Not only was she and her 3 siblings blindsided by this, but her father was devastated, and while a loving father, he really struggled to parent alone. Sammy, being the second oldest and female, recalls suddenly becoming the mum of the house and even at that young age she took on the job of keeping all the balls in the air and holding it all together to keep both the whānau and the whare running. Their community came around them and family helped, but she said they were very dark days. So in terms of having finances modelled from a young age, well, you can forget about it. There were much bigger things to concentrate on. Something that she said helped save her during that time was actually her school sport, which was netball, and staying involved in a busy team and sport sounded like it was really a good anchor for her while she remained at school and at home. She was 25 years old when she fell in love. Both her and her boyfriend worked in a supermarket-like environment, and paying for their wedding on a credit card, she got married in 1991. Now, sadly, 1991 was also the year that her father passed away. So, by the age of just 25, she had lost two big pillars in her life. Sammy and her husband moved to a big city, and through the help of his family, they bought a home for about $300,000. Now, this was expensive for the time, and the help from family came in the form of them selling their home to Sammy and her husband, but leaving some equity in it, which meant that they never had to save up for a deposit. Because they had never had to save up for anything before, they were unused to allocating a portion of their income to debt, and they struggled with their mortgage from the very beginning. Within a year, they sold it for what they paid back the bank and the family member, and they walked away with nothing, moving back to a small town. Borrowing money off family often creates issues, and it took a good amount of time for the family member and Sammy and her husband to reach a settlement that everyone could agree on. I'm not a big fan of borrowing money from family members, and while I'm not the greatest fan of the banking industry either, well, at least when you borrow from them, you have a far stronger legal contract with each other that you can turn to when your situation changes. This time they bought a house for, wait for it, $34,000, because this was 1992, remember? And she said it was the worst house on a better street. She can't recall the details, and to be honest, she said she thinks she has buried a lot of them in the interests of self-preservation, but they were both working for low incomes in factory and heavy industry jobs, and they borrowed money on credit cards that they didn't have the means to pay back. Thinking back on it now gives her the heebie-jeebies, she said. In 1992, she had her first baby, and because they needed the money and could not survive on his wages alone, after just 6 short weeks, she went back to work. They battled on with paying off the credit card and making payments on their mortgage, plus they added about $20,000 to $30,000 to their mortgage to renovate the worst house on the better street. But due to her husband being a drinker and just generally unpleasant to be around, the marriage wasn't a good one. So in 1994, Sammy gathered up a few things and her baby left. Although the divorce was legally sorted, all these years later she can't, and doesn't really want to anyway, remember all the details. But because there was little to no equity in the property anyway, he took over the mortgage and stayed in the house, and she came away with nothing. Her ex-husband was a minimum wage worker, and he paid her only $11 a week towards supporting his child. But that was only to last a few years before he completely stopped supporting his child, and the effort to chase him up seemed too great. Sammy and her young child ended up going flatting, and she managed to get a slightly higher-paying factory job. But although her personal situation had changed, her financial situation had not. She said she never even considered saving up any money or setting some aside into an emergency fund. Instead, she just spent every cent that came in, some of it because she absolutely had to pay her rent and what have you, and the rest, well, why not? In 1998, she married her second husband, and this time they paid cash for the wedding. She said it cost just a few $1,000s and was a perfect day. And she felt extra fortunate because not only was he a nice guy, but his parents, her new in-laws, were two of the most amazing people to enter her life, she said. From the get-go, her father-in-law started to try to get her to pay attention to money, saying to her to always save 10% a week. Well, she didn't take his advice then, but her new grandparents, as she came to refer to them, their money skills would finally hit the mark one day. Sadly, it wouldn't be till after they'd passed away, though. Her husband had already bought a home prior to them meeting, and although he'd been reducing his mortgage just prior to meeting her, he'd bumped it up again by buying a vehicle and extending his mortgage back out again. Sammy and her child moved in, and they set up a happy home. Her second child, and their first together, was born in 1999, and on reflection, she has No idea what they spent their money on during those years, but they seemed to get rid of it all. Her name was never on the title for the house, but she was paying towards all house and mortgage costs, and they cobbled their finances together. They kept their money separate just because it felt like it worked, but had one joint account to pay for stuff. No real money issues came up during this time, as they were both earning enough to keep their lives afloat. 3 to 4 months after her second baby was born, and with a child now in school, and right in the middle of a cold winter, she went back to her factory work. And very quickly she thought, I just can't be doing this. It was while dropping her older child at school that she saw a teacher aide at work. And she thought to herself, I want a bit of that, working with children in a nice, warm environment. She thought if she could get involved in the schooling system, she could earn a little more and be happier in her work. There was zero enjoyment in factory work in the dead of winter. An opportunity came up that they just couldn't refuse, and they sold up the house he owned and became managers in a boarding hostel, meaning that they could live and eat for rent-free. So for the first time, with no mortgage, rates, insurance and maintenance to pay, they got to keep their entire income. Plus, she also successfully reached her goal and became a teacher aide at her child's school. Things were going well. While pregnant with her third child, her husband managed to transition into a new career and move his way up the pay scale a little. So they left the hostel work, and in 2001 they moved to a new region and into a home of their own again that they had purchased with a mortgage, and this time her name was on the title. In 2001 they paid $94,000 for the home and had a $50,000 mortgage. Then in 2002 along came her third child, who was born with a condition that meant he would need lifelong support. And fortunately for Sammy, they were financially stable enough that she was able to be a stay-at-home mum and care for all 3 of her tamariki. They were in a new town, surrounded by new people, with a baby, and things were all go, and she was putting a lot of effort into managing it all. Since they had had to reshuffle their banking to buy the house, they now had joint bank accounts, and she took over managing all the bill payments and what have you. Money was still never really a focus. It just was. Apart from making the mortgage payments and paying the bills, something she had in hand, there was never any forward planning. And this is all too common in houses all over Aotearoa. The system wasn't broke, so why fix it? Even with so much to juggle, she couldn't help but notice that her husband's new job often kept him at work quite late, or he had to go away more than usual. A simple errand to buy something from town would take him away for hours, and she knew in her gut that something was wrong, but she 100% absolutely did not want to acknowledge what it might be. The stress of not wanting to know took its toll physically and mentally, until, after 6 long months, they confronted the elephant in the room, and he admitted to having been having a long-running affair with another woman. She was so stuck, she said. Sammy didn't chuck him out. Instead, she was frozen, and she just thought, this can't be happening. As was he. He couldn't make up his mind between his wife and children or his mistress. Pretty tough choice. So they both sat stuck until 2 to 3 weeks later, a friend of Sammy's came over and just gently talked to her and talked her through it, her situation and her options, and that gentle and caring kōrero planted the seed and finally made her act. In 2004, her second marriage ended and she began to parent full-time and alone. Sammy said she could feel herself grow in the week that she took control. He made his choice and it was not her, and their news and situation was shared with their wider whānau. Although he vowed and declared that he would co-parent and support his children, once the divorce and finances were settled, he never did. He essentially divorced his immediate and extended family and has never looked back. But Sammy's in-laws, while incredibly disappointed with their son, they stepped into the gaping hole that he left behind. Sammy had lived on the smell of an oily rag before, but at the age of 38, she was about to enter a whole new chapter of struggle. Her sibling and her cousin stepped in to support her, and her in-laws said, "You are not leaving that house. Those kids have had enough disruption. You are staying in that house, and the kids are staying at their school." And they helped her to make that a reality. And she was a complete mess, she said, underweight and barely functioning. Her doctor prescribed antidepressants, and she let her in-laws lead her through the financial side of divorce. Now, divorce is the easiest way to halve your net worth, and that was her reality. They set the value of the marital home, which had gone up in value, at $160,000, meaning each was entitled to $80,000. Her ex-husband took the better car and left. She took over the remaining $54,000 mortgage, which had grown, not shrunk in the time they'd owned the home, and her in-laws instructed the bank to put it on interest-only payments so that she would be making a smaller monthly payment. They were doing all they could to reduce her monthly expenses. They personally lent her $80,000, but said that she was not to either make a payment or pay any interest. This debt would just sit there until she could get her head around her situation. Sammy said she trusted them completely, and what they did for her and the kids was amazing because it stabilised her situation. The in-laws paid out their son, and once the divorce was finished, and particularly once the finances were settled, they saw very, very little of him from then on. Having these people come around her and help her was a massive support, and that is her advice for others going through something like this. You will make it as long as you get yourself a really strong support network. And I think those friends just have to show up and help out, as she was not in a fit state to seek them out. But equally, while she brought trusted friends into her situation, she kept things to herself. She didn't want to spread the news too widely, as it might have a negative effect on her kids, and as much as she would have liked to, and he genuinely would have deserved it, she never badmouthed their father to her tamariki. In some ways, the fact that he exited so completely, her kids have managed to grow up into well-adjusted, incredible adults, she said. But Sammy still had big obstacles ahead of her. She had no job, no income, a mortgage, little money sense, and 3 tamariki to care for. She turned to the government and the taxpayers of New Zealand for support and made an appointment at her local Tiharangi Tangata, or Work and Income Office. Sammy said that she was absolutely grilled by the woman she met, as she asked what benefits she would be entitled to in order to support her family. It was a deeply unpleasant experience, she said. Her ex-husband also began to pay child support of about $300 per week, but because of being on the domestic purposes benefit, she said that money did not come directly to her, and eventually, when she started working again about 3 years later, it did. As she left that meeting, she thought to herself, this is a short-term arrangement. I've got to find a way to build myself back stronger. And Winston Churchill once said, if you are going through hell, keep going. So, in an effort to better herself, she made a bold and long-term move, even though she knew that she was signing up for a really tough few years. The reason she didn't move into full-time work was because, in 2005, she started full-time study and a 3-year degree to become a primary school teacher. She knew that returning to teacher-aiding work would never provide enough to fully support 4 of them. She had to take this opportunity to retrain for a more prosperous future. You could say she worked the work and income system, and she would agree with that, but their goal and hers both aligned. They wanted her off welfare, and so did she, but she needed their financial support to do it. She hounded down every financial entitlement she could get, and this included having her study fees paid and financial support to keep herself and her 3 children's basic needs met. She said she had her 3 young kids farmed out to a variety of adults so she could be sitting at her lectures, which often started at 8 a.m. She was the mature student sitting front and centre ready to learn while the teenagers were rolling in late. And reflecting back, she doesn't know how she did it, but she did, and by the end of 2007, she was a fully qualified primary school teacher. Which was a mistake, she said, as in hindsight, had she known how much she would love secondary school teaching, she would have shot straight for that. While studying, she put in 3 years of hard graft where she was absolutely just financially scraping by. There was zero flashiness in her life. Money was spent to keep food in the cupboards, second-hand clothes on her kids, and the lights on, and that was about it. But she said, at the time, her kids really had no concept of what was going on, as protecting them and not bringing them any drama to worry about, because it was the adult's responsibility to do so, was top priority for her. She had very little money coming in, but she said it was really important that she was aware of any funding she could be owed because every $10 made a difference to their lives. Once a qualified teacher, she found work, but the problem became that it was hard to get permanent work, meaning that as soon as the term ended, so did her income. It took her 9 years to get permanent work in her community, and she would eventually do so when she moved from primary to secondary school teaching. She said if she thought the 3 years of study were financially tough, they got even tougher now, particularly during the long summer break from mid-December till finally getting a paycheck in February. She picked up summer work with local school holiday programs, working 8 till 5 with 30 screaming kids, earning low pay, but it was never enough. And being in and out of work like that makes it really hard to receive government support too. During term time, she never made the surplus required to put enough aside to cover the months without work, and nor did she really think to do so either. Because she was working as a teacher now, she was too ashamed to talk to family and ask what she could do. People would have assumed that she was doing okay. Sammy had been adding to her mortgage bit by bit to cover income shortfalls, and she knew in the back of her mind that it was the easy way out, but she started using consumer debt in the form of non-bank credit cards with its 18% interest rate to buy her groceries, knowing that she wouldn't be making any payments on the debt anytime soon, and over a period of time, the debt grew to meet the $10,000 limit. As much as she didn't understand finance, she knew that an 18% interest rate was high, and when she hit her $10,000 limit, she went to the bank and explained that she was in trouble, so they gave her a $15,000 personal loan, where at least the interest rate was slightly less. She paid off the credit card, and when I asked her what happened to the other $5,000, she said that she also bought a brand new freezer, amongst a few other things. Now, this is where lack of financial knowledge, which means you are more likely to make decisions which will work against you, and the banking industry collide. Here was someone scraping by on a limited income, which the banker could clearly see, with a mortgage on interest-only payments, a personal debt to whānau, and a problem with credit card debt, and the solution was to offer a personal loan, which still has a high interest rate instead. She doesn't recall them ever trying to show her a different way. Having felt the pressure of scraping by for so long, it seems obvious to me, and probably you, that wasting money buying a brand new freezer was the wrong choice. Fair enough if your freezer had completely blown up, but if that was the case, the cheapest second-hand one you could find, or borrowing from a friend, would have been a better option. Sammy said that in hindsight, it was insane to buy a new freezer. Yep, but clearly it was a decision that made sense at the time with the knowledge that she had. And given what she knows now, would she do it again? Absolutely not. It was not until about 2014, around 10 years after her divorce, that she finally moved off an interest-only mortgage, and this entire time, the $80,000 family loan, it just sat there as they had intended it to. They were still fine with no repayments being made, nor interest charged. Her two older children finished their schooling and they became independent, the oldest one leaving home in 2017, and the middle child making their own money now, leaving just her youngest child at home to care and pay for. And finally, her income started to increase, and she was earning about $70,000 a year. She could now cover her bills and pay her minimum mortgage payment okay. So with a clearer path ahead, and with her mortgage to the bank sitting at $57,000, she chose to financially kneecap herself instead, deciding in around 2019 that her house was really starting to need work and she needed to update her car. She rang up her always attentive mortgage broker, who picked up her call every time, and added a $110,000 renovation and a $18,000 car to her mortgage, extending the life of her debt to a 30-year mortgage term. So, at the age of 53, she signed up to pay off her mortgage by the age of 83. Now, I'm trying to control myself here, but that's just terrible, and I was really sad for her sake to hear this. At this time, she talked to her in-laws about her plans, and they also took the opportunity to say, hey, let's talk about that $80,000 that you borrowed from us. These two really were angels to Sammy the whole way through, and they said that they would wipe half of that debt, if she would pay them back the remaining $40,000. So she added that to her mortgage, making a total of $168,000 of new debt, bringing her mortgage total up to $225,000. And as a handy bonus, her bank also gave her a credit card with a $3,000 limit. So even though she had fallen into credit card debt before, been on an interest-only mortgage for 10 years because she couldn't afford a higher payment, had been adding to her mortgage bit by bit because she couldn't make ends meet, and also took out a personal loan, they still thought she would be a good candidate for a credit card with a 20% interest rate. Now, as she explained this, I can see that there were two parties to this arrangement, but I couldn't help but feel her bank could have acted in her best long-term interests more than their own. Unsurprisingly, she did max out her credit card before long. But her mortgage broker said, and you might be thinking it too, that $225,000 was a small mortgage, so don't worry about it. But for me, the point is not the size of the debt, it was the lack of financial plan to ever get it gone. She was using her house as an ATM, and as the equity in it grew, particularly given she was making improvements to it, there was nothing stopping her continuing to extend her debts. Now, reflecting back, she said that this was maybe the turning point, the very first chink of light that came in and made her feel that, in the pit of her stomach, she was not handling money well. But she was not done yet. No big turning point just yet. Her youngest child has a disability and needs a lot of care, which never comes cheaply, and Sammy became very good at securing any individualised funding that they were legally entitled to receive. Because she was working full-time, she had to go out and employ someone to take him out and take care of him during her working hours, and she found funding to cover this. Also, she was able to help other families in a similar situation financially advocate for their kids. It is hard to find care staff, and there were often gaps in the roster, and Sammy would end up filling in after hours from time to time, and she would get paid $100 to take her child and two others to after-school activities and what have you. So this became a bit of a side hustle income for her, in addition to her teaching work. With two of her children now independent, which reduced her costs, plus a little more money coming in, she said that while on one hand she was learning things about money, on the other hand she was doing dumb stuff too. Whereas this additional income could have been put towards an emergency fund or debt, she spent it instead by buying things such as a new TV from Harvey Norman and a new couch from Big Save Furniture, on credit. So that extra $100 a week that she was earning was handed straight over to pay for something that she had bought and would spend the next 2 to 3 years paying off. When her youngest child left school, a big chunk of his day was now left wide open, and Sammy didn't want him just staying home alone. Although guilt-inducing and really hard for her to do, she helped him move into a shared flat with others because it was far better for his mental health and his safety to be around other people. Again, she followed every avenue she needed to get the funding in place to enable this to happen. And then in 2022, she felt like she had won lotto, which she did play but unsurprisingly never won, when a privately bought shared house close to her home became available and her son and his two best friends could all move in. She said that this move was perfect in every way. Because each of them require 24/7 care, she said that they have a lot of funding available to them for staffing and to assist them living in the community. But when there were gaps in the roster, as there often were, Sammy found herself filling in for a day here or there, and that progressed into her having to stay overnight when needed, and it's when she went from earning an extra $100 a week to a consistent extra $500 a week. Plus, she was still able to easily work her full-time job around this. Over time, some certainty was put in place around her hours, and she was contracted to earn a gross wage of $25,000 per year from the second job. And in her mind, all her financial hardships of the past were over. Problem solved, and now she was rich and could pretty much buy anything she wanted. And she did. Think way back to the start of her second marriage when she said that she didn't know where all that money went, but it certainly got spent. Well, the same applied here. By late 2023, she had been making principal and interest payments to her mortgage, and the outstanding balance had dropped to $188,000, But she was thinking to herself, now I am 57. I still have a long way to go here. And her mind started ticking over. She had a chat with a friend and she said, I need help. I don't understand money. And that friend said, go and listen to this podcast called, you guessed it, The Happy Saver. And that was when her financial journey finally got a long overdue rocket up its butt. And she said it took her listening to 25 episodes of me saying, consumer debt sucks, never take it on, pay it off because I promise you that something will come up and slap you, and suddenly you will find yourself further in debt that you can no longer manage, for her to agree with me. She had always thought that paying off a TV over 24, 36 or 48 months was a form of saving. So let me be clear, it is not. What you have inadvertently done is sacrifice a portion of your paycheck for the next 24, 36 or 48 months instead. Buy yourself a new phone, a holiday, or any other consumer good using a credit card, and before you know it, you have given away more of your take-home pay than you had ever intended. And this is exactly how you end up living paycheck to paycheck, which is also known as broke. The way around this is to save up in a bank account, which will earn interest. And once you have reached the full amount, then you go and buy the item. Yes, it might take 12, 24 or 36 months, but you will get better and better at thinking and planning ahead for future expenses. I promise. But just looking back at her own history, it was pretty obvious that store cards, credit cards, and personal loans had been so bad for her wealth. So she decided to use her main income and her second job income to begin to pay all of her consumer debt off. And no sooner had she had this realization than she had another financial win in the form of more paid work. Another care home was short of staff, so after she had worked her full day job, and if she was not working at her child's care home by taking them places or spending the night in the home with them, she was helping out at another home. Now she was making $1,000 a week in extra income. She decided to take any opportunity for overtime that she could get, meaning that instead of earning the $25,000 she was contracted to earn, she actually earned $55,000. Her teaching day job earned her almost $100,000 a year. So with a gross income of about $155,000, she had the opportunity to really make some progress fast. She owed $8,000 for her sofa and TV and $3,000 on her credit card, and she started to pay them off. She said that during this time, and not that we had ever emailed or spoken, she had just listened to this podcast. I was in her ear saying, get an emergency fund set up, start some sinking funds for future expenses. And the money to do these things came from work. So whereas in the past she might have hesitated to pick up a shift, now she found herself asking for them. In early 2024, she was visiting with her cousin and family, and she said she talked to them about money and explained that she had extra money coming in now, a $185,000 mortgage plus $80,000 in her KiwiSaver, which I should point out was one really awesome thing that she had managed to do for herself via regular contributions from her paycheck. This is why KiwiSaver is such a huge financial win for people, because just by making contributions yourself and having your employer and the government do the same, it means that even if you blow your take-home pay, your KiwiSaver balance starts to grow. She was still in a pretty terrible fund, but I'll get to that shortly. She told her cousin that she wanted to retire at 65, and she wondered if she could. Well, bless their cotton socks, they got out a calculator and did some math, and they worked out that on her current trajectory, she could not afford to retire at 65, not with a mortgage on a 30-year term, and so little set aside for retirement. And that conversation happened on the very same day that she had listened to one of my episodes, and I had mentioned that you could email me with a question. So in April of 2024, she did. She emailed me to say that she was in the process of coming out of a sleepwalking state regarding her putia, and having battled along with zero money sense, she now felt she was getting somewhere and was in a position to pay off her $180,000 mortgage within 7 years, just before she turned 65. Her, quote, great mortgage broker had been helping her think things through, but she was looking for another opinion. And given I have no financial qualifications and I question whether her mortgage broker had many either, my opinion was all I had to give. As I was writing this podcast up, I actually went back and I found our emails, and I said to her via email, basically, I propose getting out of debt like your hair is on fire. I said that she just cannot head into retirement with a mortgage and so little money in KiwiSaver, not while she is young and in a position to do something about it. I went on to say that I was sceptical about the motives of her mortgage broker, given that their job is to get people into debt for a living, so Sammy's willingness to put it behind her once and for all might not align with the broker's and bank's interests. Without knowing about her having extended her mortgage for house repairs, I said that if she approached her broker with the request to extend her mortgage to refurbish her kitchen, they would gladly make it happen. But if you ask me, I'd say save up and pay cash for it, or don't do it at all. I said that I want to see her pay off her mortgage and say goodbye to debt forever so that she could be free to grow from there, and that doing so is possible, and it's possible far quicker than she realises. It shouldn't take 7 years, and I sent her a bunch of resources to educate herself, and I left it there. Well, she wrote back with a lot more information about her situation, and it was game on from there. She had roughly worked out that her income was about $130,000 a year, and that included overtime at the care home. She later came to realise, once she really started to take care in tracking her income, that she was earning about $25,000 more than this. She talked about how she felt embarrassed about her spending habits, anxious about money, and fearful of the future, which is why I encouraged her to not only pay off all consumer debt, but then also cut up every physical card and delete every account that tied her into debt, provider by provider. If you remove the ability to do harm to yourself, you can rebuild far faster. I said that lenders will push back at this, trying desperately to keep the lending in place, telling her, just in case you need it, you should keep it, but you have to get them out of your life because people who are good with money do not carry consumer debt. And when we chatted for this podcast, she said that this was definitely the case, with lenders all encouraging her to keep her lines of credit open just in case. She had to be quite persistent in her desire to get them closed, she said. She said that after our email exchanges, she got super frugal and pulled back her spending big time. She began to budget hard and very quickly found that she was creating a big gap of hundreds of dollars a week between what she earned and what she spent, and was just ploughing that extra money towards debt. She just simply didn't have words to explain how good taking charge like that felt. And I think that when you do a financial reset like this, cutting back your spending to the absolute minimum is such a key to your future success. Spend a month on a bare bones budget, where if you have a question about whether you can buy something other than something needed for survival during that month, the answer is a loud no. And this sets your baseline spending. There are no grey areas. In April 2024, she owed $180,000 split over 3 mortgages. The first one was for $38,000. Its term was up in June of 2024. $88,000 had a term that expired in June of 2025, and $54,000 had a term that expired in June of 2026. Initially, she focused on living on her teacher's salary and putting all other money towards her debts, but she then started to live well below her full-time salary income on a bare-bones budget, which meant she could put even more towards her debts. She went for it, and between April and June of 2024, she paid off her $8,000 of consumer debt and closed those facilities. Then she paid off her $3,000 credit card debt and cut it up, and although her bank really pushed her to keep it, she told them to close that facility. Getting these cleared so quickly was helped in part by an unexpected payment from work for some back pay that she was owed. Past Sammy might have treated this unexpected money like a lotto win, but not this time. It all went on clearing debt. Now, getting high-interest consumer debt out of the way as fast as you can gives you a psychological boost, plus it frees up monthly payments that can then be put towards your next debts, which in her case was her mortgage. By Christmas of 2024, she paid off $38,000, which was the first of her 3 mortgages. Now, because she was not so tuned into her money, when she set up this 3-pot mortgage structure, This first one somehow ended up with the ability for Sammy to make additional lump sum payments whenever she wanted to, so she did. In response to my question of why had she set it up this way, she said, no idea really. That's what happens when you stick your head in the sand when sorting your mortgages, Ruth. Now, once this debt was cleared, she went into the bank and she said to delete this ability to borrow. And again, they really pushed her to keep the facility open, but she was again adamant that she wanted it gone. In January of 2025, she turned her freed up payments and her focus to her next mortgage, which had a balance of $88,000. And when we spoke at the start of March, the balance was already down to $83,000. And for reference, the government valuation on her house is about $600,000 now. Now, this particular mortgage and the third one are on a fixed interest rate, and they limit additional payments. But when it renews in June, she said she is planning to set it up on a floating interest rate so that she can make as many payments as she likes. She's now using terminology such as attacking mortgage debt, so her mindset and her energy is definitely on track. I'd suggested in my email that her banker was not a mind reader and she should contact them directly to discuss her future plans, which to her absolute credit she did. If your financial situation and knowledge has changed, I really encourage you to make a clear plan for what you would like to do in regards to making payments, and then go and see your bank with that plan. Don't wallow about making payments that are smaller than you can afford if you have the ability to change your lending conditions with your bank. As Sammy got more fired up about paying off her mortgage, she said she was hoping that her mortgage broker would come up with ideas about how to structure her debt, and was surprised that they didn't. Well, I'm not, because you have to advocate for yourself. As well as putting a lot of her income towards debt, she was also putting some towards savings. She has created an emergency fund for the first time in her life with a current balance of $8,000, with $10,000 being her goal. She would have already hit it, but a few unexpected financial emergencies have happened in the form of emergency dental work, car bills, and glasses needing repaired. Whereas in the past, she would have put an emergency on her credit card, not anymore. She reached into her emergency fund and paid cash on the day. And I asked her how good that felt, and she simply said that it was so freeing. She said that there was not that stewing sensation in your gut as you fill out the paperwork to apply for credit to pay the bill. Instead, she moved money from her emergency fund to her EFTPOS account and paid the bill in full and with cash by herself, and it was done. She said it was hard to find the words to explain how good that felt. Now, I'm a huge advocate of sinking funds where you save up in advance for things that you know are going to happen anyway. This is the reverse of making 12, 24 or 36 months of payments. Plus, you get to earn interest, not pay it. Plus, there are no setup or admin costs. Plus, at time of purchase, you get to decide if this is the best use of your money or not before proceeding and paying in full, instead of getting a sofa on a 4-year term and regretting your decision 18 months in. Now, the emergency fund covers the things you just couldn't plan for, but out of these emergencies comes reasons to start new sinking funds. If you wear glasses, chances are that they will need replaced at some point, so start a sinking fund for this. Your car will always break down or just need general repairs and maintenance, so start a sinking fund for this. And dentistry is also an unfortunate reality at some stage of our lives, so you guessed it, start a sinking fund for this. Sammy has now done exactly that for all of these things. She really started to tune into upcoming expenses and upcoming health issues that are an inevitable part of aging. With her consumer debt gone and a plan in place for her mortgage, she decided to allocate a portion of her income to protect her most major asset, and that is her health. Nutrition and exercise had been put on the back burner for too long, and she signed up to a healthy eating plan. After an initial $150 consultation, she now pays $40 monthly, which helps her learn the right way to eat, what foods to buy, and what recipes to cook. She said that before she came to her financial senses, she spent up to about $300 a fortnight on groceries for herself. Then she went super frugal and spent just $120 a fortnight. And once she committed to her healthy eating plan, she actually increased her food bill up to about $400 a fortnight. But now it's settled back down to about $250 a fortnight. She has learned so much from the app that she uses, but will let it go in a few more months as she has the information she needs and has the habits in place to go it alone now. Alongside healthy eating, she walks every day, plus she started back at the gym after a 20-year absence, paying just $8 a week. She has not only transformed her finances, but she is in the process of transforming her body and her health too. And of course, you can't put a price on the good that this will all be doing for her mental health as well. She said that holding on to your health is hard, but it is just so important. And although she attributed spending money on food and exercise as her most extravagant purchase, we both agreed that spending money to stay healthy and well is something well worth doing. Another thing she is also spending money on now is generosity. She allows quite a significant sum of money, which is $100 a week, to be used to financially support others, whether they be friends or whānau. It is important to Sammy that she flexes her generosity muscle even while she is on the debt payoff journey, and that way it becomes a habit. And on that note too, I noticed that people who have developed a lifetime habit of spending every dollar they earn are often generous to a fault, supporting others at the expense of their retirement accounts. So I think it is natural and a good thing to continue to do, but within reason, to allocate an amount of money to generosity on a debt payoff journey, but just set a budget for it and don't go over it. So where is Sammy at now? Well, happily single for a start and loving life on her own. In terms of having someone in her life to discuss finances with, and given she lost her parents so long ago, her in-laws, particularly her father-in-law, were always there for her. They have now passed away, but more recently, and given she was ready to do things differently, it was her cousin and her cousin's husband that have played a huge part in Sammy grinding through and understanding her personal finances. She remembers Christmas Day and them using plates of food to show her how interest and principal worked on a mortgage, and he ended up using the whole turkey plate to represent interest and a small plate of peas to show principal. A perfect visual to sum it up well, she said, and she is hugely thankful for their support. Now she wants her outstanding $137,000 of mortgage debt fully paid off by December of 2026, 22 months from now. That's $6,200 a month. She will be 60 years old, which sounds a whole lot better than hoping to become debt-free at the age of 83. If she continues to be frugal and mindful with her spending, and she continues to take on extra work, she can absolutely hit this goal, while also adding to her retirement fund at the same time. There is the ongoing opportunity to pick up extra work and extra money from both of her jobs. Both roles actually work quite well together, and because a lot of the care work is overnight stays that she is paid for, Sammy doesn't feel like she is exhausting herself in the process. The second job has a low hourly rate, but the fact that she can do overnight stays in the care home where she just loves to hang out with her child and his friends, well, it makes it feel really worthwhile to her. Just before I recorded this episode, she actually let me know that her total gross income for this current financial year, that ends on the 31st of March, is looking to be $161,000, which she is absolutely buzzing about. Being debt-free, though, only solves one of her problems. Next, she needs to invest a nest egg for her to use in retirement to supplement the approximately $27,000 of government superannuation that she will receive. I just wanted to come back around to her KiwiSaver for a moment, which apart from the government super she will get from the age of 65, will be her only other means of income if she stops work at 65. Although she now has a balance of $100,000 in her KiwiSaver, and her provider has projected her balance to be $233,000 by the age of 65, because she is now in a high-growth KiwiSaver fund, she could have had a whole lot more. She started out by investing for retirement when she started work as a primary school teacher by investing in the Teachers Retirement Savings Scheme, or TRSS, which is a superannuation scheme. Initially, they matched her contributions dollar for dollar, she said, which will have done a lot for her balance. She did not sign up to KiwiSaver. But Sammy left a whole lot of money on the table because she was invested in an AMP conservative fund for 10 years with TRSS, and she didn't join KiwiSaver. Staying in a conservative fund was a huge mistake because it will barely grow beyond what you actually contribute. and the high fee that the provider charges will also eat away at returns, as will inflation. She sat and watched her TRSS fund for a while and noted that the balance of it barely moved. And after finally learning about the impact of fees on retirement savings and the importance of being in a higher growth fund while you're accumulating wealth, she began to consider making changes. When she started her second job, they asked if she wanted to join KiwiSaver, and she said no, incorrectly thinking that you couldn't be in a TRSS fund and KiwiSaver. She could have been in both, but her employer would only make contributions to one, and only the KiwiSaver fund would have got the $521 from the government each year. She could have voluntarily contributed anything she wanted to her KiwiSaver. Furthermore, she said no because the paperwork looked daunting, but she went back and she filled it out because now the prospect of not having money in retirement was more daunting. But in April of 2024, she said that she had watched her TRSS fund long enough, and given the dollar-for-dollar matching had stopped, plus the fees were high, she left that provider entirely, and she moved her entire superannuation fund into the Simplicity High Growth Fund, which she is still in today. This will mean that she cannot access any of her retirement funds until the age of 65, but she is perfectly okay with that. Instead, she is head down, bum up, and into growing this investment as high as she can. Then she revisited making payments from her second employer into what is now a KiwiSaver fund. By now, thanks to listening to it mentioned many times in this podcast, she realised that she could have two employers pay into the same KiwiSaver fund. So she went back to her second employer, and after a bit of back and forth, because initially they said no, she pushed back, and they began to contribute 3%. She set her contribution at 4% initially, before deciding that she had some catching up to do and could push it up to 10%. She also now invests 10% of her teaching salary into her KiwiSaver. Once her mortgage is gone at the end of 2026, all of her mortgage payments will be directed into her KiwiSaver, she said. She turns 65 in 2031, so she will have a few solid years to stash cash for retirement. She is on track to retire with a decent-sized nest egg, probably around $500,000, hopefully more. It depends on share market returns and the size of her contributions to her fund, in addition to what her employers add. 65-year-old Sammy is going to look back at 58-year-old Sammy and say, "Good job, girlfriend. Thank you for thinking of future me when you did." Once her mortgage is gone, she basically has 7 years to make it count, and her aim is to get to the age of 65 with about $500,000 invested in her KiwiSaver. With bigger contributions, compounding, and capital gains, I think she can do this. At this stage, she thinks that after the age of 65, she might not want to teach, but she will still want to work as a paid carer. But if she grows her superannuation as high as she can regardless, it will give her options in retirement. She has no plans to downsize her home to release equity, but again, that is an option. She is also laser focused on her bank accounts these days and has a number of sinking funds set up and working. And she said that by the end of the first month of having them set up, she was sleeping far better at night. Plus, she is already transitioning from Westpac, the bank she holds her mortgages with but has a deep dislike for, to KiwiBank, which is where she is building up some of her sinking funds. And she now has sinking funds for the following things. She's got a hair, glasses, dental one. Since being caught short last time, she won't make that mistake twice. She's got a car sinking fund. She's saving up for her child who can't save up for himself. She's got one for Christmas and birthdays, clothing, exercise, an emergency fund, of course. And she's got a Smile account, and this is a long-term savings account for big future purchases. She has now calculated she can live on $3,500 a month or $42,000 per year, leaving the rest of her income for additional mortgage payments. She is enjoying, yes, you heard that right, enjoying being frugal. She has axed her $16 a fortnight lotto habit, instead investing $10 in one ETF with Sharesies, as she wanted to learn a little about investing, something she has mentioned often on this podcast. When her mortgage is fully gone, she will transition fully to her new bank. And this is just yet another benefit of getting out of debt. It is far easier to move banks if you don't like your current bank. Now, during the last 18 months, she has found resources that have immensely helped her along the way. She credits family who have helped and supported her, plus me, the happy saver. Although I share resources and my helpful opinion with people over email, I never quite know where my suggestions will land, but I often have an inkling when the author of the email means business, and I really felt that Sammy did. So I wasn't surprised when she decided to get up and get after life. Having now heard her backstory firsthand for this interview, I'm just so grateful to have played a part in her financial awakening, and I'm so genuinely impressed how far she has come, given what she has been through. She also said that the Rebel Finance School 10-week free course was a huge help, as was Scott Pape via his book, The Barefoot Investor. She tried to use my favourite budgeting app, Pocketsmith, but it just didn't gel with her. One of her children, on the other hand, took to it. Instead, she said that she has retreated to using a book and a pencil, and she sits down for 5 minutes on a Sunday and just documents where her money was earned and spent each week. Now, I've always advocated budgeting in any way that makes sense to you, as long as you do it. I asked her if she was tracking her net worth, and she said that she had started, but has since stopped, and I suggested that she start again today. You can only know where you are going if you know where you started, and although I know she's getting such motivation from seeing debts knocked down, she needs to really see her net worth, particularly her retirement savings, grow over time. It is useful to look back 1 year or 2 years and see what your balance was, because then you can start to project forward. For example, now that I've been tracking our net worth for 10 years, I know how many years it has taken for our net worth to double, and I can then project that forward, which tells me I'm on the right track. If she has $100,000 invested now and wants to get to $500,000 in retirement in 2031, well, she's going to need to track her progress towards her goal so she knows if she is on track to meet her target or not. Now, given Sammy has learned so much and given she is a teacher, well, you can bet that the tamariki in her classrooms are now sitting ducks for some financial literacy. She has begun teaching the banker program to students who have signed up for her classes, and she said that she feels she is the best thing that is going to happen to her kids when it comes to their financial education. And as a mum, you can bet she is sharing her progress and her milestones with her own adult children too. And it seems that they have careers underway and a good head on their shoulders, and her sharing her new knowledge is helping them learn about money too, something she is particularly happy about. Now I am almost nearing the end, but before I wrap up, I have another quick message from today's fabulous sponsor. If your finances are holding you back from living the life you want, try Pocketsmith out. They've got the tools to help you make money management easier. And have we got a deal for you? Happy Saver listeners get a whopping 50% off your first 2 months of Pocketsmith's foundation plan. To get your deal, go to pocketsmith.com/The Happy Saver. That's pocketsmith.com/The Happy Saver. Firstly, I just wanted to say a huge ngā mihi nui, a heartfelt thank you, Sammy, for sharing. Sammy said that talking about her journey with money, with me, and dredging up her past can be summed up in 3 words: tough, tough, and tough. Your journey has been a tough one, Sammy, and both personally and financially, it has had some intense periods. But I think you serve as an inspiration for those who might be going through the loss of family or divorce from a spouse and parenting alone, because you show that if you surround yourself with people who have your best interests at heart, you continue to take one step at a time, you make better choices, and then you act with 100% commitment when new and useful information shows up in your inbox. Then a better you is within reach. In emails to me, and as our kōrero began, she kept saying that she was no good with money, and I had to pull her up on that. I always pull women up who say that. I said to her, please stop saying you are no good at managing your money. Clearly you are, because you have just articulated your situation to me in a way that makes sense. I had said to Sammy that I think what is missing is her in the driver's seat of her financial life. Instead, she had been allowing others to dictate her options. I told her that she needed to step up and start outlining what she wants to see happen with her finances. And I pointed out that she didn't strike me as a shrinking violet in the rest of her life, especially given how she has advocated for her youngest child. So don't be a walkover here. I told her to get busy advocating for Sammy, because the stronger she is, the stronger she will be for those 3 beautiful tamariki of hers. For Sammy and anyone else listening who says to themselves, I'm not good with money, stop it. If you say you are not good, well, you won't be. Instead, look at what you have achieved in all aspects of your life and look ahead to where you want to go. Sammy's getting there, and in less than 2 years, she said that she feels like she has awoken from a sleepwalking state and really found some direction in life. And to settle in for a chat for this podcast about the good stuff and where she is going instead of where she has been began to feel very, very good. She now says that she sees that it is not that she was not good with money, just that she didn't know what she didn't know, and that it is lovely, reassuring, and confidence building to come to this realization. She said that she was feeling all the feels that other superstars on this podcast talk about. She used to be embarrassed about her spending habits, anxious when she realized so many times over the years that money was running out, fearful about the future, and especially fearful about retirement. But to find the positives, she said that she had finally come to realize how very proud she is of the fact that she has raised 3 beautiful children, completed a university degree under the toughest of conditions, and now has a substantial salary that she is finally managing well. She is, she said, now super proud of herself and how far she has come and the rapid changes she has made in such a short space of time. Sammy said she feels like a very different person, a better version of herself. And although it took a while, I think that she can say that after that awful visit to the Work and Income office and the interrogation she received, she has finally and completely built herself back stronger. She said she is actually finding managing her money to be quite exciting, and she never thought she would see personal finances as that. And although the in-laws that she referred to as her grandparents have passed on, I'm pretty sure that they would be immensely proud and relieved that she finally got her head around money. And I suspect, being the pragmatic people that she described them to be, they would say something along the lines of, well, if you enjoyed budgeting and paying off debt, you just wait until you learn about earning interest and compounding investment growth, Sammy. So Sammy, don't stop now, just keep on going. So that is all from me this week. Another very long episode. Maybe that's just the way they are these days. If you want to get in touch, you know you can find me over at my blog, thehappysaver.com, where I share a lot of information about how I manage money in my life. Plus, if you sign up for my fortnightly email, I'm always linking to other useful personal finance blogs, podcasts, books, and just money-related content. So thank you for listening. Thank you for your time. I hope you took a few nuggets of wisdom from this episode that you can now go and apply to your own life. And please do share the Happy Saver with your friends. It's the best way that people can learn about the podcast. That's how Sammy learned about it. And I would love it if you would talk more about money with your own friends and whānau and just help me continue to help others be better with their money. So until next time, happy saving.